Hello everyone. As usual, this is Sunila and Neil welcoming you to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. So this week we thought let's do something different. We've been speaking of destinations, we've been speaking of attractions. This time we thought let's speak of something that we can actually do and really get our suits wet as we do that, if I can say so. So I want to ask you all a question. What do you think is really common between the Raja Ampat, the Galapagos Islands, the Great Blue Hole in Belize, and Oman, for that matter, and the Andaman Islands? So what do you think all of these sites have in common? Yes, you are absolutely right. It is the best crystal clear waters in the world. And these sites are also, some of the best sites that you can get your scuba gear on and and enjoy some of the best scuba diving sites anywhere in the world. You really have to see the water. Like sometimes it's so clear that you can actually sit in a boat and look down and you can see the fish. But it's really different when you get down under. So, like most adventure activities in the world, we also think that we can just walk in and go and get a scuba license and just do a scuba dive, but it's not that simple. So, Neil, what do you think of our topic today?
Well, hi Sunila, hi everyone. I think it's quite interesting. We've decided to move past destinations and talk about scuba diving. You haven't scuba dived before, I think, but I have managed to get a scuba diving license. Have you done scuba before?
I've done a discover scuba, Neil. So when I was at the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland, I just had to do it. I wanted to do it because before that in Oman, I actually took a group of some 150 people. 40 of them did it. I couldn't do it because, of course, I was working then. I couldn't go and join them. But when I was in Queensland at the Great Barrier Reef, I decided I think I need to get down, under, as they say, really for Australia. And I did a discover scuba. So it was amazing, and it sparked an interest that I must get my license. So I'm really happy that we're doing this episode today. But you have your license, so we would love to hear more about how to go about getting a scuba license. What does it take? Everything.
So, if you think about it generally, Sunila, when you're looking at adventure experiences, right, in the world, it could be like bungee jumping, it could be like, you know, skydiving or something like that. You often can just go and get like the ticket over the counter, pay for the experience and do it. But like you rightly said, there's Discover Scuba that you've done. Now, what is Discover Scuba? So generally, when you were to go to a resort, let's say Maldives, Andaman Islands, Raja Ampat, the Great Barrier Reef, and you're going to say that, okay, I'm going to pay $200 for a scuba diving uh, experience. What they really make you do is something called Discover Scuba. Now, that allows you to go to a depth of only 12 meters. Now,
Right.
according to me, and 70% of our planet is the oceans, right? A lot of marine life actually exists in the oceans well past the 12-meter barrier. So, because you are going underwater, breathing underwater is a completely different thing. And every time someone goes and does Discover Scuba, it actually is a very different experience because the first time you breathe underwater, it's completely new. And how much ever anyone would were to tell you that, okay, like, it'll be easy for me, it's quite easy, but a lot goes into that experience. And you remember Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, where Ritik Roshan is actually just awed by that scuba diving experience. That happens to everyone the first time you actually scuba dive. So you discover scuba is something that takes you to 12 meters, but the real marine life, the real uh, life underwater exists past that 12-meter point. And that is why, like, to get a license, you have to do a whole lot more. So we'll come into that as you go about asking me the multiple questions that you have.
No, I think you're really absolutely right, Neil. Like I never thought of it, but really it's one of those things that you can't decide last minute. You can't keep it for last minute. Like, even with bungee, I remember when I did bungee, I didn't say a word for 2 days because everyone else was excited and they're chattering. And I said, I don't even want to think about this. When I actually reached there, I said, I'm doing this, whatever happens. And the same thing happened in New Zealand, same thing in South Africa. So for South Africa, we had just booked a visit to the bridge and back, which is nothing. Like you just walk up to the bridge. But once I was on the bridge, I said, no, I have to jump. And I just decided last minute and changed my visit into a bungee. It was so simple. But you're right, scuba can't be done like that. And I think, thanks for clarifying between the Discover Scuba. Yes, you can go up to 12 meters, but I think it's a good entry point for someone who wants to think, can I do this? That doubt or that question in your mind, that will I be able to invest into a scuba diving license? Will I really be able to do it? I think it's good to do a scuba, Discover Scuba, get a hang of it, and you realize that it's so simple. You don't have to do you don't have to do much. You just have to get over your fears, and then you're awed by what you see. And yes, we would love to go down and see what happens below the 12 meters, as you say. So now we know that to do a real scuba, you have to go down below 12 meters underwater. So what's the first step, Neil? How do you go about getting this license? Because you can't do it without a license, right? You can't go down below unless you have the license. So of course the first step would be to get a license.
So see, you made a very valid point there. Like often people say that, oh, I have a migraine issue, I have blood pressure issues. Can I do that? And I think Discover Scuba is a good entry point. But once you've done that and once you've got a hang of it, or once you felt like, okay, I need to like really invest in this and start doing it, because it can be an expensive sport or an expensive experience or activity, right? So there are two associations around the world. One is called PADI, which is the Professional Association of Diving Instructors, and the other one is called SSI, which is the Scuba Schools International. Now, both of these associations are to teach people around the world scuba diving. The more famous, according to me, is the PADI, which is the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. Now, I did my scuba diving license back in 2015 with PADI. So, how does it work? Now, when you're doing scuba diving, it's not only understanding what you should do underwater, but it's understanding the science behind what goes in you being able to breathe underwater. You can sign up. So how, like, the first step would generally be that you sign up online or you visit your closest dive center. Now, for people like us who live in Mumbai, we don't have like the clearest water on our beaches and oceans, right? So that's why you would go to the closest dive center that we have. So in Mumbai, there is the Orca Dive Club. I think Lacquer Dives also has an office. And what it involves, that entire process of getting the licenses, you have to register on the PADI website. Now, the first thing, and of course, the website also tells you which is the nearest dive center to you. The first thing that you really do, whether you do it at a dive center or at a resort, and you have to do is you have to remember that you have to devote a certain number of days to get a license. It's not that you'll do it for 2 hours and it's done. The minimum requirement or time commitment that you need is about 4 days. But my suggestion always goes like, 4 to 6 days is a good time to get that open water license. Now, once you go to the PADI website, you have to go register for an open water license, which allows you to dive up to a maximum allowed depth of 18 meters, or which is 60 feet. Once you have registered, you spend a day doing the e-learning course where they tell you about the equipment that you're using, what you have to do in case there's an emergency. If you're diving with a buddy, how does it work, etc., etc. And it tells you about what type of different dive sites exist in the world, why it is important to know about the marine life. See, because everyone talks about protecting the corals, protecting the seabed, all of that. Now, when you dive, you may be allowed to dive up till a depth of 18 meters, but sometimes the ocean floor might be at 15 meters. So you even stepping on something can break a coral or a reef. And if you break that, it can't join back again, right? So that becomes fairly important. So you start with the e-learning. And once you're done with the e-learning, you then go to an instructor. And with the instructor, that is where you have to do a confined water dive, which is in a pool, where you take the equipment, you get used to the equipment because the equipment is heavy. And then you start getting used to it. And over a period of uh, 3 to 4 days, you do multiple dives. So the first 2 days will be about one e-learning. The second one will be a confined water dive. You're diving in a swimming pool, breathing underwater. Now, if you decide to do this in the Andaman Islands, the confined water dive is also done at beach number 2 at Havelock Island. So there's, of course, Dive India, there's Barefoot Scuba over there. So you can really do those dives over there, but it's more about like spacing it out and understanding what you're really doing, and then going about getting the license. But it takes about 4 to 5 days.
So here I want to ask you, you said 4 to 5 days, which is a fair amount of time. So for someone who's short of time, can you do it in 2 weekends as well? Like, because there is some theory involved as well. So maybe you can do the theory first. And then instead of doing like 4 to 6 days in a row, can I do it over 2 weekends? Is that possible?
It is possible. So often, say when I did it, I was told that finish the e-learning course before you reach the Andaman Islands. So the
Mhm.
e-learning course is actually 1 day. Then I managed to complete it in 3 days in the Andaman Islands. So the first day was just diving in the shallow waters of beach number 2 at Havelock. And then the third day and the fourth day was actually going into the open water and diving. And once you start diving in the open water, you just find the discover scuba experience, which is 12 meters, very boring, because you realize what really exists down there, and then it's just incredible. So I would say that you could do it over 2 weekends, but I would say give it 3 days at least by completing the e-learning course beforehand, of
I'm
course.
only beginning to
Yeah.
feel like I've done nothing like that dive. I need to get below the 12 meters for sure. But tell me, can anybody get a license, or are there any criteria, any physical criteria, age criteria, or can anyone just go ahead and get this license?
So on the PADI website, it is said that the minimum age is 10 years or older. Okay. And well, the prerequisite is you should be able to swim and medically fit for diving. Now, what does medically fit mean? You should not suffer from high blood pressure. You should not have any other issues that might affect your breathing when you're at that depth, because the lower you go, the pressure increases, right? So it's basically assuming that your lungs are contracting and you can't go past a certain depth. So that's quite important. But one of the things they make you do when the instructor is doing the course with you is that they just tell you that, okay, we are in this confined pool or we are at this beach. Now your legs can't touch the ground, but you have to just keep swimming for 10 minutes. So it's 10 minutes or 8 minutes, I can't remember that, but all they are trying to do over there is assessing whether, if you are in the open water, at least you can swim without your life jacket or anything towards your boat in case of an emergency. So that's there. And like I said, once you do the open water, you can expect shallow dives also, which is at 12 meters or 40 feet, but it can go up till a maximum allowed depth of 18 meters or 60 feet.
So here I want to ask you, Neil. I mean, do you recommend a particular place to go and get a license? You did mention a few, and also, does the price change, or is it priced equally everywhere you go? Or like, if I go and do it in Europe, other than the stay and the expenses for the flights and everything, would the license fees remain the same everywhere?
So if you go to the PADI website, it costs about $200 or $250 to get an open water license. Now
Mhm.
that includes a lot of the e-learning courses, etc., etc. Now it is a sort of uniform price, but at the same time, it changes here and there depending on whether you want your own like mask, like you want your own snorkel, etc., etc. If you want your own dive suit, it might be like a new one, like, so it might be slightly different. So in terms of where to go and get a license, you can basically go at any PADI license center or SSI license center in the world and get it. I got mine in the Andaman Islands. Of course, there's Dive India and Barefoot Scuba over there. You can go there. If you are in Mumbai or anywhere, just go to the PADI website, find the nearest dive center, and you can do it. And they are basically spread all across the world. Now, often people go to the Maldives and try to do a scuba diving course. I certainly feel that it is a little marked up and it costs you a lot more, because the PADI license or the course may not cost you, but the actual dives may be a little marked up. So my suggestion would be that if you're living in India, go to the Andaman Islands, because the Andaman Islands have some of the best waters in the world. The reefs are great. There are so many dive sites. The one that I had done was a dive site. I don't remember the name of the dive site, but a Japanese ship had sunk in 1960 and it was just a wreck. So wreck diving is a completely different thing. But as an open water diver, you can dive and see around the ship, because so after open water diving, there are multiple other licenses that I'll come to a little later on. But just diving down and suddenly seeing how big that ship was, even like, and it it was down at the ocean floor, right? So it's a completely different experience. So doing it in the Andaman Islands where visibility is very high is something incredible. So you can do it anywhere, but I would suggest doing it if you're in India, to go do it at the Andaman Islands because it is a great experience.
That really sounds incredible. Like when you were seeing, I was picturizing the whole ship underwater. That would be amazing, Neil. And you did mention that you've taken your license in 2015. So tell us a little bit more. Like, have there been more dives after that? When was your last dive? Because, the last 2 years, of course, we've been at home, but I'm sure you had a few more dives after that.
Yeah, I mean, I talk as if I've done many dives, but I've only done 10 dives. But 10 dives also included dives in Maldives and also in Oman. So Oman doesn't have many reefs. It's a barren ocean floor. So what they did was, back in the day, I think it was the 1960s or 1970s, they just created an artificial reef by sinking a ship, a Russian ballet ship, to the ocean floor, and a reef has started forming around it. So they created that reef for scuba divers and just like, to build a sort of marine ecosystem around it. So Oman was interesting, but sometimes in the Andaman waters, you'll have visibility that is 12 meters, which means you can see a far way off, at the like in the ocean. But in Oman, it was just like 5 meters and 6 meters. So I felt like it wasn't the best experience. Maldives is also great, and I've done a few dives over there. But the fact of the matter is that I did my last dive in 2018, which means it's been 3 or 4 years thanks to COVID, which means I also have to go do a refresher course because I don't remember many things. So on the PADI website, you'll also have a refresher course that you can do for, I think it's about 99 or $100, where you are just refreshing on the knowledge, because once you're down there, you should know all of those things. Why do you have to take a mandatory stop at 6 meters? Why can't you just like rush up, etc., etc.? So like a lot of those things also have to be taken into account.
So Neil, I'm really curious. So what happens when you have your open water license? Does it mean that you don't need anyone else to go down on the dive with? Can I just dive alone? And how do you know when to stop? What is 18 meters? Like what happens after that? Okay, I have my license now. So do I still need to be always with an instructor, or can I just, okay, this place is nice and I want to go diving here? Can I do that?
So I'm not able to recall correctly, but the first things they teach you when you're doing the course is that they tell you always dive with a buddy, because anything can happen to you underwater. Now, how do you realize that what depth you are at? So we have been wearing like Apple watches, or like, all of these new age smart watches. So there is something called a dive computer that you have on your hand. So the dive computer tells you the depth that you are at and how long you've been underwater. And there is also another gauge on your oxygen tank which tells you the oxygen level that you are at. So as you start descending underwater, it also tells you how deep you are. You can't go past 18 meters on an open water diving license. And when you have an open water diving license, it's always recommended that you have to do it with a dive instructor, because you still just have an open water license. And the other thing is that scuba diving is a very well regulated sport all around the world. So without a license, no one's going to give you any scuba diving equipment, whatever you may say. Like, often I've heard people say, Ki, I'll go there and instead of 12 meters, I'll ask them to take me to 15 meters and they'll show it to me. But they don't do that. It's very strict, and you can only go to 12 meters on Discover Scuba and 18 meters on an open water license.
So who can really go beyond 18? Like what is beyond 18 meters? Like does it, like you said, that after doing the license, you felt like the Discover Scuba was nothing. The real life started after 12 meters. So is there something, more exotic beyond 18 meters lying down there?
So, it's an addiction. At 12, you feel like, oh, this is amazing, I need to get 18. But once you've seen what's at 18, you start realizing that beyond 18 meters is something even better. So the next step logically is something called an advanced open water diver license, which allows you to go to a depth of 30 meters. Now 30 meters is where again there's more pressure, and because of the more pressure, it's like, you needing to know how to like control your body, control your breathing. Because I am someone who tends to breathe very heavily. So my oxygen starts depleting very fast as compared to others. So my instructor was like, breathe, do have like breathe lightly, take in shorter breaths and let out shorter air. So that is something that you can do. That is the advanced water open water license. After that, it's just like, it becomes an addiction. And then there are so many different courses that you can do. You can do something called a rescue diver, which is basically that you become a better dive buddy to your friends. If something were to happen underwater, you could become a rescue diver. There's something called a digital underwater photographer program that Paddy also offers. There's also another thing where, dry suit diver. So basically, imagine diving in the lakes of Siberia, super cold, right? That's where you need the dry suit, because it keeps you warm, it keeps you dry. So that is there. Then there is something called the underwater navigator. So you are able to navigate underwater, and you don't, like, you won't get lost, etc., etc. And there are hundreds of different courses like this. But what really happens is every dive site is different. The Andaman dive site is incredible. There's one dive site at the Andaman, and if I'm not wrong, it's called the Reef. So what happens is there's the ocean floor just going straight, 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 and boom, suddenly there's a vertical drop. So it's a reef, and the entire diving experience is about you checking out the vertical seabed that is there. So that is something called the reef. There is wreck diving, so you can get a wreck diving license, etc., etc. So there are so many different sites that you can visit, but many of these also require different types of licenses. So if you want to go to a shipwreck, inside of a shipwreck, you need a different license. So it becomes an addiction. And then I know so many of my friends who just keep on going on scuba diving holidays, and that's all they do. So that gets fairly interesting. And one of the most important things on my bucket list has always been doing a night dive. Imagine jumping into the ocean at night. You just have the small sea torch, and I think when I would do that, the only memories that would come to my mind would be Jaws, because the movie Jaws has just spoiled it for all of us, and we just get scared of sharks.
Yeah, Neil, you've been speaking of all these different dives, and it kind of reminds me of our last episode, Dwarka, where actually the underwater lost city is being discovered by scuba diving as well. So that's quite amazing. And you mentioned your friends would, go only on scuba diving holidays. For the last 2 years, we are at home. Gradually, everything's opening up. But of course, even now, I think people are preferring to travel in India as such, right? I mean, we are saying Dekho Apna Desh, and really there's so much to do in India. So what are the dive sites closer to home or in the countries just around us where we don't have to spend so much on traveling, and it would be nice because, like you mentioned, the Andamans are beautiful. So can you name a few?
So in addition to the Andamans, there's multiple dive sites along the coastline of India also. There's Gokarna, there's Pondicherry that also has a dive site, but the visibility there isn't that great. In addition to the Andaman Islands, there's also Lakshadweep, because Lakshadweep has great sites and it's untouched. So many dive clubs around India organize planned trips to Lakshadweep Islands, and then you can also do something called a liverboard. So a liverboard is basically you are living on a sailboat or a yacht all through your dive trip. So you're basically diving in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And often people think that, okay, I'll go diving in the morning and then afternoon also, and then evening I'll party with my friends. But diving is quite a tiring sport. So it gets exhausting. But Lakshadweep also has some great sites. In addition to that, of course, the Maldives and the Seychelles have great dive sites. And also Oman, like I said, offers great dive sites. But as you go to Southeast Asia, there's Indonesia, which has Raja Ampat, which is known as the second or the best diving site in the world. There's the eastern coast of Thailand, which is also known for its diving. There's Vietnam, that is fairly known for its diving. So there are just too many dive sites around the world. And if you were to make a bucket list, you could probably do 7 to 8 dives every trip, and you'll easily hit 100 dives. Like, because you maintain what is called a dive book, and you start logging your dives, and then it's like a personal accomplishment every time you hit a milestone of 25 dives, 50 dives, 100 dives.
Just hearing you speak about it, I think you can make a bucket list of just dive sites in and around Asia. I mean, and that easily could be 100 odd places and 100 odd dives just in Asia. And then we can think of other destinations as well. Like that's really amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned the liveaboard holidays, because every time I think when you really start liking scuba, then you can't think of anything else, and you just want to do that all day. Or you don't want to go on any other form of holiday, like you don't want to mix it up maybe with a bit of sightseeing on shore. And that would be really amazing to be like cast away on the sea and just keep doing that. And yeah, Neil, I think even when we just go swimming, even if you go swimming in the ocean for an hour or so, you feel so tired at night. So I can imagine, like with scuba, I think you'll sleep really well in the night. You can't party at all. Your party is in water. So that's quite nice and really interesting. I think our listeners are probably making their bucket list for now. I'm sure the word is opening. You must be planning your next scuba dive. So what comes next for you?
So to be honest, I want to go to Indonesia because Indonesia has a lot of dive sites. Like I mentioned, Raja Ampat, you need a permit to get there. And that has been on my bucket list. I want to go back to the Andaman Islands because the Andamans offer great dive sites. So just going to Havelock, staying there for about 5 or 6 days, enjoying the scuba diving there is also on the plan. I plan to go to Seychelles next month. So maybe some scuba diving there too. If not before that, anywhere else, but I want to do my refresher course before that. So I'll probably be logging into paddy.com and then doing the refresher course.
Neil, it's been wonderful, and it's. I think it's quite inspirational. Also, I think we should all go out and at least try and go to the Paddy website and see if what it takes. Maybe do a Discover Scuba dive, do the learning, and set off to get our scuba license. But as we reach towards the end of the episode, you mentioned quite a few places in and around Asia, within India as well. Are there any other places around the world that you want to go and you want to tell our listeners that they would be great spots for scuba diving as well?
Well, to be honest, like it just keeps increasing. If you're in Bali, make sure you go to the Gili Islands because they are known to have great dive sites. There are some islands in Belize where you can do some great diving.
Even Mexico
Siberia,
is supposed to have some good dive sites,
yes.
right?
Like the Caribbean islands have the great,
Huh.
like the some great waters and some now the clearest waters in the world. So that has also been something that has been on the list. And also a friend of mine is like has done the trip to Siberia and like done the Siberian dive. So that is also on the cards. But that friend, well, he is number 300 in line to go to space on the Virgin Galactic right now. So that friend does quite a bit. But yeah, that is something that I've like really wanted to do and quite excited for my next drive trip now that we've done this episode.
That's great, Neil. And so are we. We are really excited to go out there. Thank you so much. I think this has been a wonderful episode on scuba diving, and I'm sure we'll come back with something equally interesting next week. So keep listening and keep sharing. You can always give us your feedback. Neil@veenaward.com and Sunila@veenaward.com are our email addresses. Really nice speaking to you, Neil, and see you soon. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye, everyone. See you. Have a great weekend.